Welcome to the Prospect Podcast. I'm Coach Schumann, and I have, as always, Coach D. Today's to my right, I guess, and in our little
our ever-changing layout,
musical chairs, whatever StreamYard wants to put us. But at least our guest is on top, which is good. That worked out good. Sometimes me or you are on top, and I always feel weird when we're on top and they're like in the corner, but I don't know how to fix it. So I don't know how to fix it, so I just go with whatever it is. But we have a fantastic guest today. We were just talking on a pre-show last on 2024, which is incredible that it's been almost 2 years. Nick Soto, he's the strength conditioning coach for baseball at the University of Miami, the U. He's been 15 years as director of performance at multiple different places, Gorilla Baseball, Elite U, Performance. And he's becoming as one of like the gurus in speed, strength, conditioning, but really developing that explosiveness in his baseball players at a really elite level. He's at the forefront of one of obviously widely considered one of the best baseball programs in the United States. I think the coach that brought you in with JT Artiga, right? Was the guy originally brought you in, and that's. He's really done some amazing things. He's had so many pros that he's worked with, Manny Machado, Yuli Guerrero, Lourdes Guerrero Jr., Gene Segura, Zach Anito, MJ Melendez, NFL players, Alvin Kamara, Denzel Perryman, Antro Rowe, Gus Edwards, among others, just some of the names of guys he's worked with in the past. So it's really great to have him on. He's really somebody that's kind of established himself as one of the best in the industry. So we're excited to talk to him. Welcome back, Coach.
Stop. I'm getting red.
Yeah. Hey, come on, man. It's a long list.
No, thank you guys for having me. It was a blast last time, so I'm glad. I can't believe it's been 2 years, but
crazy.
Yeah. It feels like it was just literally just a few months ago. But great to catch up, guys, in the pre-show. So yeah, I'm ready to get into it and dig deep here.
No doubt. It's and since you've come on, we actually have our own website, which I have to look and see, make sure your episode. I'm sure it is, but we have all of our guests. It's prospectpodcast.com. So it has all of our guests, and we're slowly uploading images of every guy, and girl. And it has your episode, so you can actually click on your name and your bio, and it'll have a little bio, and then it has, the episodes that you did with us, and we update that every week or so to keep it up to date. But yeah, so it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool to see like all the guests that have been on there. So it's great. It's great having you on. Talk about, I guess, a little bit, just for everybody to understand kind of some of the areas that you really focus on with respect to baseball, and some of the kind of core, I guess, competencies that you would say are things that are important to you with respect to developing the players that you work with.
Okay, for sure. Yeah. By the way, my eyes keep going up. It's because my laptop's broken, so I have a screen up here and I have the camera down here. So I'm just kind of.
So do I. I have the same thing.
Bullshit or anything like that going on. It's just.
No.
I have the same thing.
I'm always taking notes. My eyes are everywhere. I'm always taking notes or doing something while. It's all good.
So I'm looking up. I'm actually looking at you. I promise. So basically, when I first really dug deep into baseball, even before I dug deep into baseball, when I first kind of like started getting baseball athletes through the door, I had never really played baseball or anything like that. So I tackled it kind of the way I tackled any athlete at the time, which is like, how fast can I make this athlete? How explosive can I make this athlete? And I didn't pay too much attention to the fact that it was an overhead athlete or a rotational athlete or any of this stuff. As I gotten older and more mature and thought about things, I pay more attention to that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's still about making an athlete as athletic, and be redundant here, as possible. And I think if you do that right, you're gonna get a better baseball player. If you make a guy more athletic and he's on the mound, he's going to be able to handle the mound better. I feel, he's going to have better feel for how he is on the mound from a pitching perspective. Obviously that's what the first thing we're looking at. And obviously when you're coming off the mound for whatever play you got to make in the infield as well. But we really feel that if you tackle that kind of the athletic equation of rapid force production, eccentric force production, you're gonna get better, I guess, numbers, if you want to call it that, or whatever, off your hitting and your pitching and your throwing and whatever it may be.
Well, I think there's no doubt, and they talk a lot about, like, obviously with baseball with what is it, the TrackMan? Is that what what's the that they measure?
Soto, there's TrackMan, there's a bunch of different things out there, yeah, that
they use to measure things. It's become like
we got plates that are mounts. We got it last year, so this is a mound, like, just one of these.
Really?
And it's got a full force plate on there that gives you data not only for like how much force you're producing, against gravity, but also like horizontal force, linear force, like how much force you're bleeding,
crazy
laterally or medially, if you will. It's got that, and then that kind of is set up with one of these high speed or a couple of high speed video cameras. So now it's capturing the data on the force plate and then looking at it through what the movement looks like, and then trying to kind of put things together. We're getting we just got it. We haven't started using it yet. Now we have a force plate even for hitters. So now you're at the plate and you get force plate numbers. So
unbelievable. It's almost too much data, right? Like it's almost too much data to just kind of like overcompensate, right? And we talk about it all the time, obviously. I mean, look, you're at the highest of the high levels, right? So they deserve that type of attention when it comes to it.
Absolutely.
But we talk about, like, just how much technology kind of plays a role now in terms of it. And look, you can still be the we don't do it like that, or we afford that, or whatever that is. But to me, like, the more information helps, no matter what you're looking at, right? And numbers are rock hard evidence. So now, because there are certain people that need to see something rock hard, like the numbers themselves, here's the data, this is what it is, like, they got to see that in order for it to kind of be there, right? Whereas for the most part, a lot of guys, in the back end, when we didn't have that, just kind of went off of kind of what it was. To really get those little, like, really key parts of that stuff can only help guys improve moving forward. We talk about, with shred mills, the shred mills now, and all those kind of things with, the movement and the pace of the bar. And now you can track it through, some of those things that you're having, right? Like, all that data kind of comes back to help, guys, really put their teams and their players in a better position. It's kind of crazy.
Yeah. And then you're using this, hopefully, you can sift through all the extra information. There's so much information. But if you could, pinpoint, 3-4 things that you really want to look at that you think could help guide your athletes or help drive whatever adaptation you're trying to get out of your athletes, then the data's friggin' worth it, and
no doubt.
On the mound force plate, I'm still trying to learn that. I don't know it. To be honest with you, I think the pitching staff's doing a lot better job than I am on that. I'm a little bit behind on that. I'm still, hands-on hip, counter movement, jump on my force plate type of data collection, and I'm using that.
Right.
But the idea now
is rightfully so, though. That's your world. You know what I'm saying? Like, you're going to learn something new moving forward. I mean, you just got a new toy. You know what I'm saying? We all got to jump on it and take it for a test spin, but we really got to learn it before we can really kind of use it and find out all of it that it could probably do. Because there's probably a bunch of things that it can produce or give you numbers on, and you just really aren't aware of it yet. It's just part of technology. Dave does a lot of the technology stuff in terms of, he's always on the cutting edge of whatever it is. So I'm always just kind of, I
would love for you, and this would just be kind of your pet project. If you send to me, Derek will give you my email if you wanted to, send me the things from a decision-making process for that help you, what I mean? Like how you could prescribe what you want. Like, so I don't know, this data from the force plate helps me make a decision on this, for example.
Right.
If you had those things and you sent it to me, I could probably build you a toy that you could start to play with, and then we could build something off of that for you. So that's something to think about. That maybe because I've been doing a lot of stuff with this. Like originally, kind of came to my mind. Actually, not speed related. Actually, came to my mind football related with coaching my son's team because there's a team. We're probably the second best team in the youth group and maybe in the country and at our division level. But the best team is actually also in our hometown. So they won the Nationals, right? So I was trying to decode them and utilizing AI and stuff like that. And it helped me tremendously for us to play better against them. And that kind of started triggering me thinking like, okay, AI and tools like that, measurement tools, the whole objective is to help you make better decisions, right? That's all those things can't make decisions for you, at least not yet.
Right.
But you still have to make your own decision and prescribe your own dose of what you want to happen for your athletes. But it can help you, give you information that you can hopefully translate and be able to make into a better decision. And the better you're able to translate makes you a better coach so you can make better decisions for what you think they need to do going forward, right? Yeah. So that's kind of my emphasis. So I'm like constantly striving to do that. I have a project I'm doing right now for basketball from an intellectual, like a basketball IQ standpoint that I'm doing for someone actually that I do another podcast with. So I'm kind of into that whole try to figure out how we can help coaches make better decisions, not make the decisions for them. They have to make their own decisions, but give them information because so much information out there can become like really like, okay, I'm looking at this number. Like, what does this actually mean for him when he hits a baseball? Right. You know what I mean? Like, like, what does it actually mean when he decides? Yeah. How does he decide to, do we decide to steal second base because his speed is this,
Right.
Like, and I'm sure your coaches, your baseball coaches are trying. Baseball is one of the most heavily analytical sports there is, and they probably have tools already. Yeah, they probably already have tools that are helping them with that. But strength and conditioning, the tools are being built out so quickly on the number wise that it's like, okay, great, this is awesome. I need you to help me understand, like, how do I make a decision off of this number reaction time? What does this actually mean for me training wise? You know what I mean? Like I could guess, but I need to really have more, if I'm going to try and get an athlete to an elite level, I want to eliminate the variables. I don't want to be guessing all the time that this is correct when an athlete's obviously career is at stake in a lot of these situations. Yeah. So that's kind of just the sidebar conversation. But I'm curious with, with all the things that are out there and from a training standpoint, and you talked about the things that are so important. Do baseball players, first and foremost, do you have to like, and we talked a little bit about this last time, are you in like a yin and a yang process, strength and conditioning wise and speed wise with them as you get into the season? Like, are there some guys that you customize things to, or are there guys that or do you work more to the general norms? That's always a big question when guys have a number of athletes that work with like like you do. I'd love for you to talk about that with respect to, what you're doing.
Yeah, for sure. So to simplify things as much as I can for myself, I try to get as many guys into a bucket as possible, right?
Got it.
Having said that, luckily I'm at a point in my life where I'm cognizant that everybody's different. Everybody's going to react different. I'm not so hard-headed as I was in my 20s or even in my early 30s, where I can have a conversation with an athlete, and if an athlete doesn't feel comfortable doing something, with a game coming up or a series coming up, or they're feeling a little fatigued, or even if it's just a self-evaluation, right? They may be showing numbers that are fantastic, right? So we put guys on force plates since last year, actually, we've stepped our game up on that end where now we put guys on force plate almost daily. And that's just kind of giving us just a good look, not only as far as their adaptation and progression, which is obviously what we're after, but also are they exhausted? Are they physically not able to produce the numbers that they usually produce? Right? Is it a neural system? Is it just the muscles are taxed? Are they just totally just fatigued mentally? What's the issue there, if there is an issue? And that could kind of help us. But even with that, there's a guy there might be a guy out there that's jumping better than ever, but they're telling you, man, I'm freaking dog tired. I don't feel like I can do this today. I doubt they're lying at this point. You know what I'm saying? They've been
right
for 8 months. Now you're gonna start lying about what you can and can't
Coach,
do.
I think that's so incredibly intriguing too, because out of all the quote unquote main sports, right? People always view baseball as the least physical, the least athletically taxing sport, right? Like that's at the bottom of the barrel when it comes to your big four or whatever you want to talk about. But I've always said this, right? And it's the mental side of baseball, right, can crush you physically.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just because of there's so many of these situations, right? And then to me, the pace of play being as slow as it is allows you so much more time in your head. And if that, brain is the strongest muscle in your body, right, is constantly full go, right, on every pitch, every situation, like you're out there and it's just going. It's not so it's read and react when the action is happening. But I would love to see a study on like how much actual movement is involved, right, in a game of baseball between pitches and when a pitch happens and all of that, for how much time you're actually sitting there and letting your brain just go wild in terms of that physical taxing aspect of it. And I think the training always needs to mimic a game-like situation, right? So that to me is just always so intriguing when it comes to baseball itself, of how the physical aspect and the mental aspect, like it's just so, I mean, you're talking about at Major League Baseball, right? Or you're talking about like even in college, right? These road trips, these 3-game series, that, you know what I mean? Like they play every single day. And it's a long game, right? And then there's this situation, that situation, right? It's not like there's not a clock on it like football, basketball, hockey, right? Like it could be for as ever long as guys want to be out there. It's just, to me, that is kind of so different than every other sport when it comes down to like the exhaustion aspect of it, and the physicality of it. People don't like think that it's, oh, well, they're just out there sitting around on a field. Like, buddy, you understand what's going on inside their head? Like every single pitch, if the ball goes here, I got this. If this goes here, I got that. Or like, if this guy moves, like there's just so much going on. Do you see that play a role in your players in their training aspect of how they try to get into that like mental zone of, hey, we got to do this in order for me to kind of be able to handle this on the field itself?
So, so from a stress perspective, you look at it from that perspective. I'll kind of like circling around to get to your answer. But I don't remember who I heard say, and maybe it's been multiple people that have said this. Stress is stress, right? So whether it's mental stress or physical stress that you're applying on the body, stress is stress, and it's gonna tax the system, right? So like you said, in baseball, it's so mental, right? You're at the think about when you're at the plate, right? And you swung at a pitch that you knew you shouldn't have swung at.
Why did I do that?
And then you gotta get ready for that next pitch. That's stress, dude. And then let's say you strike out. Now you gotta go sit in the dugout until your part of your offensive part of the inning's over. Then you gotta get back on defense, clear your head. Now you're focusing. Okay, what pitch is coming in? Okay, this pitch is coming in. I gotta be ready for this. It's an inside pitch on a lefty. Where am I gonna position myself? All that stuff. So yeah, so stress is stress. So yeah, and then you're doing that for 4 hours straight.
Literally, yeah.
So I mean, our games have been 4 hours plus this year so far. I get done with the game and I'm done. I'm exhausted. The last thing I want to think about is going to the weight room and getting a lift in. And I'm not doing anything. I'm just standing in the dugout cheering.
That's that that's that neural. Yeah, right. That neural tax, right, on the body. and it's interesting because obviously that's getting studied more and more.
Yes.
And that was starting to be a hot button. I remember when we first talked, but it's really now obviously like every time I turn around, some Instagram videos talking about taxing the neural system.
Yeah.
Whether they actually are or they aren't is maybe debatable, but
Right. Yeah.
but what you're talking there, 100% is obviously right. 100% is draining it, and that's something that you could actually observe it. I think now that I've started to see it more, you could actually observe it a lot in the athlete's demeanor. You know what I mean? Like they're the better you are, I guess, psychologically with your athletes, the psychology part of it,
Mm-hmm.
you know which kids are more likely that they're totally taxed versus a kid who just likes to chill. You know what I mean? But you can see it. You can see it because you see it visibly on your guys probably that are the hardest workers, right? That would fight through it, and you're like, wow, this guy's drudging into the weight room or drudging into our workout. And you obviously know because this guy's a hard worker, and if he's struggling, there might be a more likelihood that something negative could happen if we don't adjust the workout or maybe even rest him, depending on what the situation is. I love the force plate thing is so interesting to me because just explain for maybe people who don't understand, who maybe live under a rock, like what does a force plate do, and what system do you use from a force plate standpoint, and what is like kind of the general design of the force plate measurements?
Yeah. So I mean, force plates have been around for a while now. They used to be just at the very top elite facilities. I used to have them. They were super expensive to get. The data collection was very difficult to kind of like pull out what you were trying to pull out. And these companies have kind of come along and made it not only affordable, but made the data gathering a lot easier to comprehend. So basically, it's a board that you stand on that just gathers basically any kind of force that's on it against gravity. So if you're standing on this board and I don't know the actual inner workings of the springs or however that the inner system is, I'm definitely not
right
for that. But basically, if I shift to my left, it'll recognize that I shift to my left. If I shift to my right, if I shift to my toes, the sensors pick all that stuff up. I should say sensors. That's probably a better word. So basically, for us in the strength and conditioning world, there's a lot of stuff we could do with it. We could put a guy, a girl, an athlete on a squat rack, have them stand on there, and they could just do a basic squat. And with that basic squat, we can see how much force they're producing left leg versus right leg. We could see how fast they're moving through the motion. We can see how they're going, how much force they're producing on the way down. We can see how much force they're producing when they're stopping their motion on the way down and then returning to the concentric or the way up portion. We could see how fast that movement is, how hard that movement is, how deep they're actually going into their movement. So it's pretty uncanny everything you can get out of it, right? So for us, and for most SNCs, we've kind of standardized it. You can do isometric stuff also, so you can get under an immovable object and try to either push it or pull it, and then see how much force you can produce that way as well, right? Like an isometric strength test. Most of us have kind of from what I've seen, it just for me it was a simplicity thing. I'm assuming for most strength coaches the same thing. We do a hand on hip counter movement jump. So basically hand on hip, continuous squat, not continuous squat jump, but a squat jump where you don't pause at the bottom, right? So you put your hands on your hips. That basically takes away the element of the arms being able to help you, which is a big difference whether you use your arms or not. And then from there you start getting into, well, this guy uses his arms better. This guy doesn't know how to use his arms. This guy just didn't use his arms this rep. So it takes a lot of variability out of it if you just put the hands on the hips and just see what the legs can do. And even there, you're still going to have a lot of variability. Sometimes a guy's going to bend more. Sometimes a guy's going to bend faster. But that's all good stuff to see. But basically, you put your hands on your hips and you jump as high as you can, right? And then I can gather all the information on your effort on trying to jump as high as you can. Again, how far you bent down when you did it, how hard you hit the brakes on the way down, which is a big thing for us, is that eccentric force production, especially the dynamic eccentric force production. How much force you produced on the way up, how fast that force was, rate of force development, impulse, all this kind of stuff. We're able to collect. Even differences between the left leg and the right leg. And then even when they land, after they jumped, we could collect data at that point, which I'm not really doing too much of, but we could if we kind of made that an emphasis or a focus. But it just kind of gives us a really good picture from an athlete is how it'll tell you how much vertical they produced, and basically I'm able to see how much rapid force an athlete is able to generate, and then kind of dissect what they're good at, what they're not good at. So if an athlete, let's say two athletes jump the same, they say they both jump 20 inches, right, under vertical. One athlete had really high rate of force, eccentric rate of force development. So again, stopping force, or I should say braking rate of force development actually, rather than eccentric. So how hard and fast they hit the brakes. The other guy generated, and let's say that guy also generated a lot of power. The other guy might have had a lot weaker rate of force, braking rate of force development, but they had a lot higher impulse, right? Maybe their power wasn't as high, but their impulse was as high. So they may take longer to produce the power, but as they're taking longer, they're creating a lot more impulse, right? So that's two different athletes. Okay, so two different athletes are kind of producing the same number as far as height. So then from there, it's a kind of you start getting to to what we're talking about, which is like, okay, what decision am I going to make based on that data? Am I going to try to move the high impulse, slow braking RFD guy into faster type of braking? Is that going to help him produce more? Maybe the answer is yes, right? And usually the answer is you want to kind of pick up wherever you're weak, right? You want to lift that up a little bit. But a lot of times, especially as you get older and older with your athletes, you want to just accentuate what they're really good at. So if I have a high impulse guy that doesn't move very fast, but he can produce a ton of force, maybe let's really accentuate that. Yeah, we're going to try to make him move a little faster and this and that, get him more athletic in that sense. But we're not going to lose the fact that what this guy is really good at is this. Let's make that as good as possible. One of the guys that I kind of took that, and it was from the track and field world, was like Dan Paff and Stu McMillan, those guys at Altus.
Yep.
Where they're very high on that. I don't even think at this point. I mean, again, they're talking about the elite of the elite of the elite. I think they barely, at least as far as their philosophy goes. I'm sure once you get into the nitty gritty, you can't help yourself, but try to help a guy that's deficient in something get there. But they're mainly looking at, how do I make their good stuff better?
Yep.
Right? What makes them special? How do I get that better? Because that's the athlete that they are. That's the kind of athlete that they are. And that resonates with me. That makes a lot of sense to me. So I try, when I see these numbers, I try to kind of use that to kind of guide the athlete and letting them know what kind of athlete they are, right? And then try to continue to accentuate those strengths. And yeah, at the same time, if we see something like, man, okay, so we know that pitchers' rate of force development should be 13 to 1500, braking rate of force development again. Right, 13 or 15,000, whatever it is. So if they're at 8,000, okay, if we help that, we could probably help their lead leg in hitting the brakes a little harder, right? So now, okay, so in that case, yeah, we're gonna really work to get that number up at least to an average rate. Let's say they're at 8,000, we're gonna get them to 11,000, right? On their ability to stop momentum,
right.
Right. So we'll focus a little bit more on the dynamic ISO stuff that we do, which is one of the kind of the central points of the kind of training that we look at, is how hard we can train the body to hit the brakes. Right. So we may give that athlete a little more of that. Right. And in doing so, you're hoping, you're kind of trusting that it's not going to take away from his ability to still produce that impulse.
That's a great point. And in baseball, explosive force generation and then stopping forces are so important for the finishing explosion, right? So a pitcher, he comes out really strong, and then he's when he comes to decelerate, that has to be super forceful, right? Because that enables the ball to go faster, right? Or it's same thing in hitting, right? How he turns the hips, how much force he generates when the foot comes down and turns the hips. He starts at a certain point, and he obviously has to be able to be great at decelerating, right? The better he is at decelerating, the more force that he's able to handle at deceleration allows him to really give him more power, right? And it's really
yeah, that's what gives you the whipping effect in either hitting or throwing. You know, it's can I produce a lot of force on my front leg to get myself into rotation, and then if I can hit the brakes on my lead leg as hard as I possibly can, then that'll create that whipping through of the hips and the torso through the range, whether you're hitting or throwing. So yeah, absolutely. So if you're really strong on the concentric side, but you suck at the eccentric part of it, you're not going to be really good unless you're obviously there's outliers out there that just aren't physical specimens, but could just hit the snot out of a ball.
Huge guys. Yeah. But even huge guys, right? Like a huge guy who generates a lot of force right from the get-go. Even if you can only get him to a certain point, stopping wise, if you balance I'm curious your thoughts on this. If you're able to balance out the supportive muscles and obviously ligaments, right, around them stopping, even if they're not the greatest at stopping, because they have so much force, they have support when they stop, so they don't get injured or put their foot down wrong or something like that. I'm curious, like, because you talked about it, which I thought was really. I've watched a lot of stuff on Dan Pfaff and Stu McMillan, and they're like called mad scientists, right? Like they're always experimenting, and obviously they have a huge background of all the great Olympians that they've worked with and those kind of things. Yeah. So they have that base, right? So when they continue to experiment, they have the base of what they learned already to be able to grow from it. So, but I think it's a really good point on each athlete, is good at certain things and making sure they can continue to improve whatever they can on what they're good at. On things that they aren't as good at, maybe like a guy who generates a lot of force but is slow doing it, trying to get them to improve the areas that they're weak on, maybe getting them a little bit quicker might help them generate more force. But then I was also thinking like injury, right? So the most important part is, you might only be able to get them to go a certain amount more quickly. Like you're going to maximize as much as you can, but they're a better area. They're going to be probably able to, because they're good at a certain thing, maybe develop more in that area. Now you want to be able to build the supportive area around that. So when they generate generates a certain amount of power, they don't tear a quad muscle, you know what I mean, or a hip flexor or something. So talk about that supportive based stuff, like what that balancing act of how you would do that with your athletes.
Yeah. So and that's a great point, right? And then the more you kind of accentuate a strength, right, and you just keep leaning on that, then there's a very big potential there to have a major disbalance in function, right? Where that's where injuries could definitely live and be prominent even, right? So it's always kind of like a balancing act where you want to get an athlete, say, as explosive as possible, right? We'll talk about the word explosion, power, whatever. So we're trying to make an athlete as explosive as possible. But too explosive may mean that the tendon can't handle that, right? Too explosive may mean that maybe if they're more tendon based, maybe the muscle can't handle the tug of the tendon, and now you're getting a lot of hamstring injuries, calf injuries, whatever it may be, right? So too much to an extreme will lead to that, right? So that's kind of where the strength training part of performance training can really kind of help an athlete mitigate some of this stuff, right? So again, explosion being kind of like the main goal, and then the more explosive you get, the more you expose yourself to to these high rates of forces that the body may not be able to handle, if you can kind of strengthen the muscles and tendons to work together,
Yep.
and to not overpower each other, again based on what kind of athlete you are, you can do a lot towards mitigating a lot of these injuries, right? And yeah, the less athletic you are, just like let's say down a straight line, probably the less likely you are going to be of getting injured. um, but the more athletic you are, the more force you're producing, the faster you're producing that force, the more likely you are going to get injured. So, like I tell guys when I'm teaching them how to run, I'm like, if you're really slow, I'm not totally afraid of you having horrible mechanics and pulling your hamstring. But if you're really fast and you have horrible mechanics, you're going to pull your hamstring. Like it's inevitable, Also, if you're very deconditioned, right? Let's say you're deconditioned, but you have an ability to produce force, and you maybe have really good mechanics, and that the mechanics kind of accentuates your ability to produce that force. Let's say again when you're sprinting, just to make it easy, and you're deconditioned, you haven't been doing it, you're gonna pull a muscle. You're gonna pull usually again hamstring, groin, quad, any of those things, calf. You're gonna pull it because now you're just producing a lot more force than the muscle's ready for, because it just hasn't been trained for it, right? So part of it is the inoculation process, which is like you expose the tissue to this action over and over and over again, to the point where the tissue now is used to it, right? And once the tissue is used to it, then you're a lot less. It's conditioned now to be able to do those movements at a very high rate.
Now, Coach, I had a question when it comes to that aspect right there. The difference between kind of training those things that are maybe weaker and whatnot, or prehab, right? Like kind of some of those things when you're talking in that world of it. Maybe you had an injury that was, happened a while back, right? Like,
Yeah.
or going into the season, like this is a little weaker or whatnot. Where do you create that prehab type of work, or the actual now, hey, we're getting into kind of this starting to condition or train, right? Like, where is that kind of separator, and how do you kind of differentiate between those two things and whatnot? Because it's a question that we've seen kind of come up, recently in terms of, hey, we're playing this sport. These are more of the muscles and areas that are going to be really taxing on it. Maybe you need to do a little extra work here, right?
Yeah.
Or maybe you need to, maybe, like I said, like maybe you've had a quad in the past, or you've already done a hamstring and whatnot. And now, okay, it's been healthy for a really long time, but you don't want that obviously to come up and come back. So would that be more prehab, or is that actual like hyper focused training in those certain types of areas?
I think prehab is always kind of like part of the equation. I think obviously earlier on when let's say you're getting a guy coming in from summer, or you with your pro guys, you're getting them off coming in from a very long season. I think you kind of always start with that prehab or that general or even general prep, and then general prep will hopefully carry on some of that prehab stuff.
Got it.
And even if it's more of an, like you said, it's like something that would happen in the past, but that it's there. Okay, so we're gonna pay a little bit more attention. We're, like, listen, before we really start going full speed here,
Right.
I'm just gonna keep using sprinting because it's just a low hanging fruit. It's easy to explain. We're gonna start with some extra isometrics on the hamstring, and then those isometrics we may start with a little bit longer hold with a little bit less intensity, and we're gonna build to maximal intensity type isometrics for the hamstring. We're going to do that with the eccentrics also, right? As we start graduating through the isometrics, we might start doing the same kind of thing with the eccentrics. We go slow eccentrics in the beginning, like heavy slow eccentrics, and then we start working more of like kind of like accentuated eccentrics, where you're moving more load that you could actually control, but you're fighting it as much as you can, and then you're moving into like fast dynamic eccentrics or dynamic isos. Like again, like what I was talking about, where you drop as fast as possible and then hit the brakes, and your ability to hit the brakes. You're putting that together as you're exposing them to more and more velocity as they're running, right? So
Right.
it's kind of like go hand in hand. right?
Absolutely.
So,
And I'm
so
sure it's also, more positional based as well too, right? Like your pitchers are going to deal with more of this, right? Like your outfielders are going to kind of do that. I mean, catcher for the one, that position itself is like, holy shit. You know what I mean? You're thinking about being in that position for that long on a regular, you know what I mean? On the regular basis. Pitchers I'm sure is just like a whole,
pitchers is 365 prehab. Yeah. Pitchers, you're always
I can't even imagine.
Extra rotation, flexion, extension, whatever you may need, but you're always doing some kind of prehab with pitchers because you kind of have to. They're just abusing that arm,
Literally,
literally from the neck all the way through the fingers. So yes, you're always working that. You're including mobility. You're including mobility, hopefully, with all your athletes to some degree,
of course.
But yeah, you're including a lot of mobility, keeping them as limber as they can be, making sure they have control of that mobility is a big one for us. Where can you get into a deep stretch and have strength in that deep stretch? Can you produce force in that deep stretch, whether it be the upper limbs or the lower limbs or the torso, right? And then how much control you do have of these ranges is vital, I think. And it goes into the whole play of having your tendons and your muscles and your connective tissue, which I know is one of the things we had talking about.
Yeah,
all kind of working together to keep the system whole.
And I think that's perfect. That's a great segue into kind of what we
kind of that was an on purpose, by the way.
Well, it was awesome. Perfect.
Well, it kind of is getting towards that because I wrote down a couple things. Obviously, I know Derek had mentioned to you like a lot of the stuff with like fascia and the training elements, and I kind of and we had a great discussion actually yesterday with
Dr. Dylan Martinez.
Derek's always better with names than I am. Dr. Dylan Martinez, where we dived into a lot of it. He had a lot of studies that he's an interesting guy. You might want to look him up. I thought he was very, very, very interesting because he's definitely, I would guess, because he's in that Midwest area. I'm sure he has a lot of influences from like Tony Holler and those things, but he's also research based too, like in the sense that he's a coach, but he's also research based because of he works at a college, right? So he's a professor at a university. So I thought it was a really interesting conversation, and we end up getting into this. I actually didn't plan on getting into it, but we started to get into it when we started talking like about prehab and all those kind of things. I'm curious. So, I mean, I always think like when I see like my favorite fascia guy is the one guy who's kind of extreme, but it's an Asian fella. I can't think of his name, but he like points out all these things, and he's pitching some sort of program. But I think it's interesting because it made me look up more and more and more and more, not just because of him, but like, but how he was talking about it, and I had dealt with it because my son was going through Seavers when he was growing real fast, and he was in a boot for a month because it gotten so bad, and then all of a sudden he couldn't he went from being a fast person to being slow, like literally, like was like slow. And then played the football season, got to like maybe a 50% base level. Once the football season ended, I really dove into building off of what the rehab group did with him, which she did a great job. Bobby's wife, Bobby Smith's wife, Sharon Smith in Elite Sports Physical Therapy. They're in Tinton Falls, New Jersey. And they did a great job with him a lot. And I asked him a lot of the stuff that they were doing, and he explained to me, and I saw a lot of different things. I started doing it, and literally, I use this as my base example, but his vertical jump went up 5.5 inches. I just timed him in his flying 10. It's improved tremendously, and a lot of the work we weren't we were sprinting indoors on the scale mill and stuff like that, which definitely helped. And these high end machines that you probably have, but they have also at Lifetime Fitness. We have these super high end like. I was like, wow, we could do sled work on this, and we could do all this kind of stuff on it. So, but what my point is that I tried to rebuild them from the ground up, right? And literally, because everything else at first I was trying did not work at all. Like, he was doing great on like the trap bar deadlifts. He was getting, his force was great. He was generating great force. Wasn't getting faster. Like none of it was working, right? And then I started doing that and trying to rebuild from the ground up from what, and very quickly he got better. And I said yesterday, I'd use the dot drill as my baseline to see where he was going. Basically, like 2 feet, then 1 foot, another foot. I could see the difference without having a force plate. Obviously, I could see the difference, and now I'd see where it's close to baseline. So the pre-out part of it's kind of similar to this, but my thought process is like, we probably don't do as much as we should because it's not exciting. It's not fun. It doesn't look as cool to, as it does when you sprint and you do, but it helps those things supportive wise. Talk about what your thoughts are on fascia, what your thoughts are on tendon development as a whole, which kind of is what, to me, like fascia and the overlying muscle stuff is, for the most part, like developing these areas that are often not really developed and building from the ground up. I'd love for your thoughts on that. And I also have a question on like flywheel training too as well. But I want you to dive into that first.
Okay. So, yeah, I guess if you want to call it my issue with, I don't know if I'd call it an issue. A lot of this fascia training that they're talking about now, I don't know if I would necessarily call it fascial training. Like fascial training, your fascia is being trained no matter what you're doing, right? Just like your muscles are being trained no matter what you're doing, your tendons are being trained. Just what adaptation are you looking for, and are you trying to get? Really, at the end of the day, when people start going fascia specific, or at least they're considering it fascia specific, and you look at the exercises that they're putting together to make it fascia specific, like the cross lines and all this stuff. That's kind of where I just kind of like, and I've taken a pretty deep dive into it. I've bought a bunch of the courses on it and stuff like just out of curiosity, just be like, where are these guys?
Right.
And then I see it and I'm like, well, you're just lightening the load on this movement and then adding a movement here. Like that's not necessarily, necessarily going to move the needle on your fascia, for instance, right? Now there's other stuff that we can do that is absolutely, there's a drill that we do, for instance, that's I think is going right along the lines of what you're talking about, which lives somewhere maybe in that prehab. I use it as a prep almost, and I don't use it all the time because there's some taxation that I've noticed when I time guys on it. But we use it every few weeks for a few weeks, and it's basically getting the lower leg ready, the lower leg, particularly the ankle and the foot, ready for acceleration type movements or change of direction type movements. So basically you put your foot, I'm gonna try to do the best I can. Like if you'll imagine my hand being my foot, if I put my toes down on the ground, right? And then I have my shank coming this, or my shin coming this way, right? I try to put everything in an angle where the body would be hitting in an acceleration point where the foot's hitting the ground. So basically you're trying to get the shin at about a 45-degree angle this way, maybe a little bit more aggressive. You're trying to get a 90-degree angle of the knee. So now the thigh's coming at a 45-degree angle this way. And then you're trying to get the torso to match the shin angle here, right? And you could be grabbing onto something. You could add resistance to it. And funny enough, I'll share a quick thing. One of these kind of things that I went down with the fascia, the guy who's a really, I don't even remember his name right now, but he's like one of the top gurus in
right.
In fascial training. I saw him doing this drill, and I'm like, dude, I do this drill all the time. I don't consider it fascia training. But he was literally doing the same thing. I had never seen it before. And it was funny enough. He came up with the same.
That's my number one drill I do now. That drill is my that hold on it. Like I try to have him hold it.
You lift your heel in your holding position. Yeah. So that's a very position specific training, exercise that will hopefully kind of strengthen the ankle, but the ankle and the foot. But if you hold it long enough, your thigh starts burning, your ass starts burning.
Absolutely.
Starts burning, and
you feel it in your knee. You feel it on your knee. You know what I mean? Like the muscle, the quad muscles right above the knee. Yeah, yeah.
The quad tendon, and everything. So you're working that whole system up in a very specific angle that hopefully will translate into you being able to push the ground when you're accelerating. But you know, like you said, you're burning everything. So you're not just feeling your tendons, you're also feeling your muscles working. And then from there, we started adding components to it. Like now, so then we started doing quick hops on it. So now you're not just holding, but now you're quick hopping. And you're trying to get the heel not to drop. So now you're creating that ankle stiffness or the Achilles stiffness that we want in sprinting, right? Then we do big jumps and sticks, same thing, right? So now we're doing some of that dynamic ISO. That's a big part of what I do. And now you're jumping and you're sticking. You know, the whole time somebody's tugging on a band at your waist while you're doing this stuff. You could go single leg, you could go bilateral. By the way, we usually do a single leg. You also get some of that kind of like cross lateral, I guess, stabilization in there because you're on one leg, so your body's kind of like not balanced perfectly and stuff. So there's a lot of good stuff to that. I don't do it because it's fascial training.
Right. You don't call it fascial training.
Right. And I don't do it.
Do you think there's something, do you think calling it a separate thing, like listen, if I said to my son, you're doing fascial training, he wouldn't know what the hell I'm talking about. Right. So I'm not obviously telling him he's doing fascial training or any of his teammates when we do it. Right.
Right.
Like they know it's basically ankle. I call it ankle holds. And then we do a version of it with wall sits. You know what I mean? Like the toes, the heels off the ground, and you do it like that with that. Right. I think you're 100%. I think you're 100% right. I really think of it almost as prehab, really, and then post. You could do it in post-hab too, right? Like after training, and I guess you could do it. You know, like I've heard Chris Corpus talk about that particular drill a lot, which is where I was looking for something. And I saw him show it, explain it, and I was like, oh, this hits exactly what I need to work on with some of my guys. And I just thought of it as immediately like, oh wow, this is like wall sits for your calves and your Achilles, right? Like that's how my mind went to originally. Then you go down a rabbit hole and you realize they call it fascia training, right? But that was what my mind went to, like, okay, yeah, wall sits work your quads, your butt, and your glutes and your hamstrings. And this works a little bit more primarily in your Achilles and your foot and your tendons and your calves, but it's the same kind of concept, isometric hold, and then building off of that isometric hold. I mean, if you go way back to the old bigger, which you're old enough to remember this, the bigger, faster, stronger days.
Yeah.
The dot drill, which was amazing to me that like now everyone they've gotten away from it because it's not sexy, the dot drill. Mm-hmm. For some reason, I always end up going back to with a lot of things. Like I still remember his name, Stefan Fernholm, doing all those different drills. Like I used to get the book religiously, and that, that's how I learned to do like overspeed and holding things back and plyometrics. But they were actually doing a lot of those things way back when, which obviously they got a lot from the Eastern Bloc stuff. But it was, to me, like when someone says dot drill, if you were to say that was fast, which you would call probably now they would call that. Back then they called it plyometrics. Now these guys would call it fascia training. If I'm not mistaken, they would call the dot drill more along of fascia training. The only positive I think of separating it is not necessarily for the athlete, because the athlete I don't think cares what you call any of it. Doesn't get me better. Doesn't get me better. They don't care what you call it. I think it could help from developing, not guys like you who know what they're doing, like, hey, I'm incorporating this already in my workouts, right? The athlete I don't think cares. They care about how much they get better. I think it does help newer trainers who to start to segment the areas that they're working out in, because I think a lot of the younger guys are not as real world experience where they made mistakes. Like we grew up in, okay, we made the mistakes of running guys gassers, and we made the mistakes of, you know what I'm saying? Like we realized, dude, no matter what we did, like this guy never got faster doing all these things. You know what I'm saying? Like we made all of those mistakes. The younger guys are jumping right into whatever's on Instagram.
Yeah.
And if you could explain the workout process is like, okay, fascia is like a form of prehab. Then you incorporate maybe that early in your workout. Maybe you take a portion of it to bring them back, center them mid-workout, and definitely at the end something along those lines. And if you cover your bases there, a drill here, a drill there, then you should help the general development. Because I think about it as a supportive function. When an athlete sprints, and for not as good athletes, like when a not as good athlete starts to develop speed and does get injured, and let's say hamstring or stuff, or a superior athlete gets injured at high velocity speeds, it's usually the motor control not being somehow the foot doesn't hit exactly the timing that they felt it should have hit. It's not conscious, obviously.
Right.
It's because of and it mishits, or there's already a strain to begin with, and it hits a little slower, and now it pulls and it tears, right? And that could be a developing athlete who's now going from terrible to a level, some level, right?
Yeah.
Or a great athlete who is now going from 10.01 to 9.97, and getting to 9.97 near their capacity could pull them, right? So I'd love am I on point on that? I mean, I kind of went a lot of different tangents, but I'm trying to organize kind of how I think about it. I'm just curious, your thoughts from that standpoint.
I think when you keep it simple like that, I think that works. I think it starts falling apart when you start overcomplicating things to get to the fascial part of the training. That's where these guys lose me. When they start incorporating and it's not like I'm against, like, for instance, okay, you could easily say that. Again, I'll go back first. I'll say this. I think anything that you do is going to be fascial training, right? The fascial part is part of the system, right? Just like, like if I do calf raises, I'm also working my calf tendon. Like
it's not independent. Yeah.
So I could do like we're talking about very position specific stuff to get an adaptation there. But it's not like if I do calf raises, I'm not also working my Achilles tendon. I'm still working my Achilles tendon, right? Just like I'm still working my calf, it's just from a different kind of stimulus. So when these guys start like let's say like a push pull, right? And I use this drill, by the way. Not even knocking this drill, right? So let's say you have one of these cable system or even bands, and you're pulling on one side and you're pushing on the other, right? And you're either trying to go very fluid with it, or you're trying to go very explosive with it, or you're trying to go very heavy with it, whatever it may be. And you're getting a lot of just kind of like that torso work, also trying to control that. Even whether you're rotating or whether you're trying to fight the rotation, you're getting a lot of core work in that as you're pushing and pulling from one end and pushing from one end and pulling from the other. Okay. When you start getting super complicated with that, and then adding a foot raise and this and that, and all of a sudden, well, now you can't really push and pull the way, when it gets too convoluted, I guess is when these fascial guys start losing me. You know what I'm saying? When they lose sight of the adaptational process, what it takes to create adaptation, I think a better way to categorize things sometimes, and maybe the isometrics don't really fit in this, but how much, like you talked about the dot drill, how much movement are you giving athletes, right? Where's the movement training, right? And some of this fascial stuff could fall into, you have these guys that they have like the cable, and they twist and they turn and do all this stuff with the cable and stuff like that. There's a place for that. I'm not knocking that, right? And that's movement based, and movement's important, and rotational movement's important, and especially like in my sport, right? And training it is important. But when you say this is what you have to do, and this is what's going to make you a better athlete, and you stop doing Bulgarian split squats because of it, or you stop doing those isos that we were just talking about because of it, or you stop doing dot drill because now everything's here and you're doing this stuff, that's when you just piss me off.
So it's funny. I agree with it. Like I think that there's certain. I always kind of cut through the mustard and that like I realize everybody's got to make a living and they're trying to sell their expertise in this area. And if it's sold as an own, they sell it almost as an only thing. As you know, it's like this. You know, you have an outfit, right, that you wear, right, and the core outfit, you got a suit, right, and the suit looks great. And you want to, if you have an accessory like a watch or you wear a chain or, you know, whatever you wear as your accessories, there might be some accessories you need, right? So if you got a suit, you got to wear shoes, right? Nice shoes. So that might be an accessory, but that's a necessary accessory. But if you just wear shoes and you don't wear clothes, and you show up at a nice event, you probably got a problem, right? So it depends on where you are. I guess if you're at a nude beach, maybe not. But outside of a nude beach, you know, you're probably going to want to, you know, make sure you have clothes associated with those shoes. So so I kind of look at it like that, and I agree. Like if they're just saying, hey, just show up with a pair of shoes, you know, you probably have a problem, right? So I think those are really, really great points. And I think that I think it's just, you know, another element that it reminds me of is like the quote unquote, you know, I see the businesses that are called the stretch lab, you know, like it's all over the country now, the stretch lab.
Okay.
I'm like, okay, well, it's good. There's one actually 15 minutes from me. I'm like, so wait, I'm going to pay a monthly membership to just get stretched? Like that's just one piece of the puzzle. Right. So, you know, I mean, yes, you know, there's a place for stretching and those kind of things, but that's one piece of the puzzle. And someone's figured out that actually, basically, obviously, they're smarter than I am. They figured out that people would pay a monthly membership for that. So, you know, I think that's or a lot of times women will say, you know, women who are not like they don't really want to work out. They'll just do Pilates. Right. Yeah. I'm like, okay, well, that's a piece of working out. But if you don't, you know, really hit the gym, you're not going to get everything out of it. Like you do Pilates once in a while, right? And yes, Pilates are great. There's no doubt. But that's not going to get you on all your goals, right? So I think it's a really good point. Really great points on it, and it's a good way to think about it. I think it might help for a structured standpoint for coaches and you know, like I said, I feel like there's a gap. Like the Stu McMillans, the Dan Pfaffs, guys like yourself, guys like Tony Holler, guys like Chris Corfus, they can get away with doing like a focused area. When they talk about a focused area like that, like I see Chris, you know, is dive heavy into the I can't think of what the 1080, not the 1080 machine, but their standalone machine is. And he's dive heavy into like the sprinting angles with like driving the foot back, and I'm like, yeah, I could see where the value is, but if we're wasting all our time on that and not sprinting and not getting resistance, like you can get that from putting a proper sled weight on you. You know what I mean? Like you're going to push back harder if I'm not mistaken, right? Yeah. Yes, you can isolate it and measure it with the 10.8, no doubt. But there's a place for that. But it's not if you just do that, you're not going to get faster, in my opinion.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? If you're just pushing back, but it's a supportive mechanism that can help people that are sprinting run faster. I agree on that. Flywheel. I see so much stuff on Flywheel. I'm curious if you use it at all. I have not bought one. I want to get one, but I don't know. I can't wrap my head completely around if it's going to be any more beneficial than just doing squats or belt squats or Bulgarian squats. Like, is that going to move the needle at all? Or is this just a pretty machine that like might give you something else to do in a gym?
I actually really like the Flywheel.
Okay, great. Good. I want to hear this. Perfect.
Yeah, I actually really like the Flywheel. I don't have any here, but now you just got me thinking when they were asking me, oh, well, what are you going to get? What are you going to ask for next year? I might actually ask for some Flywheels. So when I first saw it, again, I was like, I was pretty skeptical of it. I was like, it just looks like, maybe some fluff, And but then I tried one and I understood the concept of it. And so basically, I'll give you like the simplest drill that I've used it for, which is like RDLs. Okay. And again, the different size of the wheel will matter on this. But the harder I go concentrically, the more it makes the wheel spin, right? Obviously. So then the harder is going to yank me back into my eccentric load. So it is a really easy way to get eccentric overload. And the eccentric overload does not have to be slow for it to be overloaded, which is great. So because you could come back down, like it'll yank you, you control it as much as you want to control it, but it'll yank you back down, and then again you got to concentrically yank it back up. So the way I see it is a couple things. So one, I'm getting an eccentric overload right off rip. Two, because I'm looking for an eccentric overload, I'm going to push harder on my concentric part of the motion, right? So I'm now getting more intent out of the movement because of this apparatus. And then again, because of the eccentric overload, as I'm coming back down, the transition from eccentric to concentric is gonna be that much more stimulant because it's really pulling me down with a lot of speed and a lot of force, and now I got to counteract that to get back up again. So it's kind of giving it to me in both directions. Does that make sense?
That makes a ton of sense. So you feel like it might form more adaptations, right, over time?
I think it'll. I don't know if it necessarily will create more adaptation. I know it'll create a lot more stimulus, which should create a lot more adaptation, right? Your intent and your stimulus is up. Your adaptation should be up. I haven't done enough of my own research to say yes for sure definitively.
Right.
Then again, I say that about anything because we'll look at a training program that we've done. We have most of our guys again do mostly the same thing, and then we start kind of finding particular things that we may want to work on this athlete or that athlete. 85 to 95% is still going to be the same thing for our athletes across the board. So we've had periods, where we've gone, 2 months straight of just every time they run or every time they hit the force plate, they're getting better, right? And every time they run, they're knocking off 100th or 200th or whatever. And by the time we're done with those 2 months, almost to a T, every athlete is down, let's say 0.2 of a second or 1/10 and a half of a second or whatever, like down the board. Like there's not one guy that hasn't done it. Well, what part of that training caused it? Was it the whole thing? Was it the fact that I put snatches with drop jumps, and I put trap bar deadlifts with lunge jumps, or was it the trap bar, or was it the sprinting that we were doing? We were getting so many things going on. Was it the fact that we didn't have that much baseball going on, so they're more rested? Was it like, you know what I'm saying? Like
it's so hard.
What was it of that training? Everybody got better, or here's a worse one. What did we do 3 months before that? What do we do on I'm sorry, like, so 2 months? So the third month before that, could that have caused the trickle adaptation to what we're seeing now? You know what I mean? So you can't.
It's so hard to measure, right?
Right. In this day and age, unless I'm going to take a guy and have him say, "Hey, listen," or have a group, and I can't do this because I got to get everybody better. But I'll take 20 guys here, and you guys are just going to squat jump, and we're going to do it 3 times a week, and you're not doing anything else. And then you guys over here, you guys are going to be using the flywheel, and you're going to do it 3 times a week, and you're doing absolutely nothing else. All right, now let's see what happens, right? Like that's the only way. And even then, you got other variables you could look into, rest, nutrition. There's so many other things. So there's no way to really pinpoint one. And as I got deeper and deeper into research, is when I started kind of figuring that out. That there's you can look at the research and you're always going to find something that helps you justify what you do, right? Oh yes, right here. Yes, they were working power. They were working at 0.8 meters per second. That's the one that works, and that's why I work 0.8 meters per second. Right. But what else were they doing? So it's like it
is an art for obviously that's why there's an arms race in a data standpoint, right? Because people are trying to figure out like, is there something for this? But obviously everything's customized, and there is an art form to it. It's like it's because there's a human element, right? It's a human being. So every human being is slightly made differently, no matter who they are. And there's, obviously, even though it's very hard in training to completely customize to every single individual athlete. That is why you do see, as guys become really like wealthy and at the highest level, like when people are like, how does Tom Brady play this long? How does Derek Jeter play this long? Like how do these guys who become first you have to get to the point where you're the among the best, and then you actually do have an opportunity at that point to then get full customization, which actually that's how some of these guys nowadays, not talking about like, the Mickey Mantle era, right? That was really kind of like genetic, and you were genetically built to be able to last longer. Not that some of those guys didn't train, but now you can customize the workouts to you because now you have the money to do it. You have the ability. Derrick Henry can pay his guy if they were this, and his guy for that, and his guy for that, and it gives them 4 or 5 years extra on their career at a really high level. Some cases even more, depending on sport. Baseball can give you 10 years. It can give
No
you
doubt.
10 years on your career because you are getting hit. Nobody's hitting you, right? So if you can take care of your body better, you can last longer. So I think it's really it's an art form, and then until you get to the highest of the highest levels when it becomes a customization. That was what was so interesting, even though it sucks that it was marred by steroids and super amount of performance enhancing, because what guys like Charlie Francis and what even the Soviets and the East Germans were doing, even though they tracked, obviously that's how you knew they were doing steroids, they tracked all the injections. But it was very interesting to start to read that stuff, because you could see, because those people didn't have free will, they didn't have choice, for the most part, they were put into these kind of protocols, and you're actually able to see, because otherwise it would be very hard to really get standardization on protocols, because there is an art form element to it and always an experimentation element. So if the Soviets and the East Germans had a contribution, that would probably be their contribution and everything beyond steroids, was they gave us certain protocols that probably showed to work pretty well with the athletes. It's very interesting, because I always think that's why strength and conditioning and speed development, even though there's so many things that are tried and true, right? It continues to evolve. I look at the track times of these kids in the South.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, it's been incredible.
Because they're able to now more than ever, because they have a T-Apex or a 1080 machine, and their track coaches are focused on track, and maybe those kids are track athletes primarily, right? And you're seeing 9.8s and 9.9s
Unbelievable.
from high school. A sophomore kid ran, I think, 9.9 or 9.8, who's actually he's a football player, and he ran like 9.9 something, I think, or 9. It might have been win-aided, but he was in the 9s. And like the first meet or second meet of the year, I can't remember if it was Texas or Florida or Georgia, but it was one of those states. And listen, obviously human beings do continue to evolve over thousands and thousands of years, but to me, that's a large amount of the training effect and information that people now know, that even at young ages, these guys are able to really develop. The first track athlete that I saw of all time that youth translated to elite level was Noah Lyles. Mm-hmm. He's kind of like the first athlete in the modern era that was getting more. He was obviously great right from the get-go, but got more evolved training right from the time he was in high school, broke all these national records. In the era when we were growing up, we used to see like, oh, this kid ran 10.10, and then like, he wasn't an Olympian. He didn't make it. Yeah. All over the place, right? Noah Lyles was really the first to be among those guys that translated into being an elite runner at the highest level. Carl Lewis was great at 18. I would say that Carl Lewis was really, I know he trained hard and all those things, but he was natural. Like,
oh yeah.
He was as natural I'm not saying he didn't work. I'm sure he obviously worked, but he long jumped 26 feet in high school. You know what I mean? Like, in New Jersey, that might still be the record, right? So he was obviously naturally far above other people. Noah Lyles obviously was at a certain level, but it then translated as translated into a youth athlete to a superior elite athlete, and he lifts, and he does those things. Carl Lewis, has been adamant about that. He didn't do very much lifting, right? So yeah,
different era though, right? Like, and I think
different
the
era.
lifting was focused on that point, and obviously the equipment wasn't like whatever.
Well, Ben Johnson was. So I always think that was an interesting point. So Carl Lewis was the best. I mean, I'm not saying he didn't do some PEDs himself in some version of it. I mean, it may not have been what Ben Johnson did, horse steroids or whatever. But Ben Johnson did utilize. That was one of the first guys that you actually saw, because of PEDs, because of Charlie Francis's model, strength training incorporated with the sprinters. Sprinters are always naturally, they're going to look great because sprinting itself is so dynamic. They're going to look jacked. Without lifting, they're going to look jacked because of what they're doing. But Ben Johnson obviously was able to leverage it. The shame was that he did so many steroids, because you can never go back and say, okay, what part of this was all of the training and what part of this was steroid enhancement. So, that's always the hard part of it all. Obviously, there's a portion of it that made him a big difference.
I think that's something too, Dave. You talk about like physical appearance and that whatnot. I mean, look at baseball in general, right? Like, and how that's kind of like, you know what I mean? Like the prototypical how you look as a baseball player in this modern era is very, very different from even like, not even pre-steroid era, right? I mean,
the steroid era ushered that in, though. I'll let you finish there, but that I would almost argue it's not right. I'm not saying it's right; it's wrong. Okay, because I'm just saying that it eventually changed the way people thought about training. I'm sorry, go finish there.
Absolutely.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I'm just saying now though, like you look at like some of those guys in the early 90s or even before that, right? Like the training aspect of like baseball has always been the sport that you could play, you could be really good and not have to do all of that physical lifting, running, sprinting, right? Like all of that stuff in order to be really good, because if you could just put a round bat on a round ball 3 out of 10 times, like you're in the Hall of Fame, you know what I mean? And if you could, run whatever it is, bases, or do any of that, you know what I mean? People thought Ricky Henderson was like a freak of nature because he could steal bases and sprint at such a high speed. Whereas now, like you look at it and these guys care about their bodies way more or focus way more on the training aspect of it than those earlier guys at all, right? And we're talking steroid era or not. I just think the focus on training itself, the overall, like everything about it now is totally different, right? I mean, you could probably do some comparison pictures of eras within baseball and just see how the body has changed or how these guys treat themselves. You know what I'm saying? Now, look, I know there's outliers in your Aaron Judges of the world that are just like complete freaks of nature, but that tracks across any sport. I think the idea, I'd love to think about too, Nick, like how many college baseball programs in the 90s employed a strength and conditioning staff,
I know
what I'm saying? Yeah. I think some of those guys that dove into that really kind of escalated their program in a totally different manner, where now if you don't have it, right, like you're definitely the outlier. Whereas in previous eras, if you did, now you're kind of different in that retrospect. I mean, shit, just look at the investment at your school, coach, like in your facilities for baseball only as it is, right? Yeah. Like, and I understand you're the staple. This is the University of Miami and baseball has always mattered there, right?
Yeah.
But look, you can just see it trending other places as well, where, that facility of here's where we get our work done and whatever, like outside of the quote X's and O's of baseball, of like, here's our cages we hit in, and here's our field and our diamond and all that, like the weight rooms and the strength stuff and all of the things that go into it, I think it's totally on a whole different level now, even than probably 5-10 years ago. I mean, I just think it's changed so much.
Oh, yeah.
Am I right in that kind of, Nick? Have you seen the focus around the game itself? And this is someone like yourself who came from the kind of private sector, right, where guys hired you for that specific. I mean, that wouldn't have been a thing for you 10 years ago, right? Like, you wouldn't have had those opportunities to go and work with a baseball guy one-on-one to increase his quote strength and his skills in that world. Now they may have hired a guy as a hitting coach, right, or a guy to work on their fielding, but for them to hire somebody to be like, hey, come in, make me bigger, faster, stronger, so now I can generate this power, or it can all translate, like, that's something that's very different.
Oh yeah, and I mean, it's changed like in every aspect, like at every level also, right? And so back when I first started this stuff, the only athletes I could convince to pay me any kind of money for me to get them ready for the season was football guys, right? And football guys probably started that, I don't know, sometime in the 90s.
I would think, yeah, definitely.
Well, Nebraska Power, Nebraska Power for a long time was ahead of it.
They had strength and conditioning coaches that would do stuff, they would do.
But I also, even in that, right? Like we argue, but we bring this to the forefront all the time. There are coaches that when you talk conditioning, they're talking gassers, 100-yard sprints, right? Yes. Like 300-yard shuttles, things that want to tax guys and literally physically crush them. Then there are guys that talk conditioning and they talk, all right, like, let's run routes or let's do pace of play, right? So we can kind of incorporate a game-like situation into it, whereas we're trying to build it up. Then you have the sprint-based football community where they're literally tracking steps and distances and miles per hour. And, hey, you hit this top speed today, you're not going to do that until after the next game, because they're totally on that side of it. So it's still a very much I don't want to say all over the place type of world, but guys fit into their own categories, and kind of how they approach everything itself. And that's, I think like baseball guys had to be the most convinced, right? In terms of this can help you and watch what it can do as you kind of grow and change. Right. So I think baseball was kind of like the last group to kind of fall in line, I think, with that. Right. And look, my own opinion is that 100 and what do they play? 162 in the major leagues, right? Like, that's a lot of fucking games, dude. So to physically tax your body in the weight room every single day, right? I feel for them was like kind of something that I don't need to do that every day. I have to go out and play, right? Whereas if you take that, to me, if you take it in, certain doses, micro doses of that, now it continues your longevity and your health. And I think that's the biggest key for me, was when baseball guys realized doing all of that extra stuff kept them healthy. And now they could play even longer in a game where you're already probably playing till you're 40 if you're really good, right? Like, we're not talking football here where the average length of a career is, 2.5 to 3 years. Baseball guys are in this shit for the long haul, right? I mean, even with the whole Tommy John coming back and doing it, like, that shit's incredible because, like that stuff itself too, like ACLs and all that. But like, I just think baseball was the outlier in it. And now to see guys like you and staffs being put together to kind of help those guys with this aspect, that with the strength and conditioning aspect of it, that's like a whole different world of now. It's only going to continue to grow and get even more, you know what I'm saying? Like, I just think it's just different.
Yeah, I mean, and thanks to that steroid era is probably the reason why I have a job to begin with, and I have a career. Even in the private sector, I have a career because of that. Like you guys were talking about. I think that steroid era showed everybody, it's like, hey, you could play, because back then it was like, if you lift weights, you can't throw a ball, you can't swing a bat, and then all of a sudden it's like, well, look at Jose Canseco,
right.
Then obviously, and obviously, Barry Bonds and Sammy and all those guys took it.
Yep, Sammy, Mark McGwire. Look at all those guys.
All the level, but and then on the pitching side as well, you had Clemens and all those guys that were 40 years old throwing 101. But but yeah, but basically that era did kind of like create a mind shift to like, hey, you know what, working out can help you play this game better. You know, it's not gonna help you hit the ball any better, right?
Health.
You're not gonna go from 280 to 285 because you can bench press 200 pounds, but you know, you might put a couple more balls out in the stands. And
and I think the health thing really hits home for a lot of guys, right?
Yeah.
Staying healthy, not having these career-ending injuries, or even those nagging injuries that they're always there, right? Like you hear so many things about, you know, a guy did this and now it's just kind of always with him for for his entire. Oh, once he did that, you know, like back in the day, oh, he tore his ACL. You were damaged goods. Now guys come back bigger, faster, stronger, right? Or an Achilles used to be a career ender. You look at these guys in the NBA, they're popping Achilles like every other week. And now all of a sudden, 9 months later, they're back and they're freaking, you know what I mean? Like they're dialing it up. That stuff, I think, always, and especially for me, that works at the high school level, right? Parents are always like, well, you guys do all of this. Why do you do this? Why do you do this? You know what I mean? Like, well, it's injury prevention. Like we don't want your kids getting hurt. And the more we do this, the less that kind of tracks, you know? And then as you get to the higher levels, like when you show that, hey, this keeps guys healthy, or, you know, now if you're healthy, you have the opportunity to make more money and all this other kind of things like that, I think is the single most selling point for why we do these certain things and the exercises, all that stuff. No doubt, because nobody wants to be hurt. Or how many stories of, oh, if that guy stayed healthy, right? Or if this is that. Like if you can kind of lessen the opportunity to get hurt by doing some of these things and then prove it with your numbers and statistics and all that, people buy in, no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, especially like down here in South Florida, where specificity has become like the main thing. Like you play the sport all year round now. You know, so, you know, before, you know, you played baseball during baseball season, you played soccer during soccer season, you played football during football season, and then basketball during basketball season. That's kind of how it went. You know, you didn't really have a choice. And
that trained those other muscles that you wouldn't, whatever. Now you're talking a guy that's playing basketball year round.
So you got to figure something out for that guy. Yeah, you got to give him that other stimulus that's not just basketball.
100%. Otherwise, you're almost overtraining or overworking those same types of muscles and ligaments and all that stuff over and over and over. And then by the time they're whatever, it's like, you know, I've had 3 surgeries on this knee. Yep. It's like, really? Like, you know what I mean? Because that was you did it. It trained other stuff naturally just by playing those other sports. But now with everybody trying to be a one-trick pony and I only do this, like you see those injuries to the other stuff that's not being worked as much because you're only focusing on those certain things.
100%.
No doubt.
I'm curious, before we let you go, with respect to like what you see in the industry, like with the stuff that you're doing, do you ever get pushback? Now, obviously your coaches are on board with, you know, what you're doing.
That's from the coaches. It's a good question.
From other coaches that you might talk to in the industry or stuff like that when you explain what you do, or now, you know, it might be different from you because you're at the University of Miami, which is obviously a reputable baseball program. Right. So you might not get as much pushback.
Not too many people questioning what the U is doing, you know.
Right, but I'm curious. I'm curious if do guys ever say, "Oh, you know, I disagree with you doing speed training with these guys." I'm curious what happens from there in your discussions.
It happens all the time. Obviously, the biggest one for me, like everybody likes the speed work for the most part. You know, they may think, oh, you know, you focus a little bit too much on that. Maybe you should condition them a little bit more. I'm like, that's how I condition. Whatever. We'll get into those discussions here and there. But the main one is the addition of the Olympic lifts, right?
Interesting.
It's the snatches and the cleans and the push jerks, split jerks, any kind of overhead jerking action. There's people out there that still absolutely hate it. They absolutely hate that I do it. They think that I'm destroying these kids by doing it, and I'm literally telling them I'm actually doing the complete opposite. I'm giving these guys the stimulus they need to actually stay healthy in the joints that are going to be the most taxed for the sport. You know, aside from the from how I believe or what I believe as far as athletic capacity and force production and stuff like that that you get from these lifts. And I'm not saying that you have to do them. There's plenty of programs out there that don't do them, you know, and that's fine. But for me, again, I can't. You know, there's so many other factors. I can't say, you know, for certain. You know, snatches and cleans are gonna help you throw the ball harder, help you hit the ball harder. I can't say that because there's so many other things that we do as well. I can say that it's definitely never hurt us. Without a doubt, it's definitely never hurt us. I can say that our track record, and I'm knock on wood for saying this out loud, our track record of having healthy athletes last year in, year out, entire seasons is there. You know,
that you can measure easily, right? Too. So
we don't have guys going out for injuries the way other guys have. Even you just look at our demographic of like the high school guys that do it, right? Which is a lot bigger pool. Our guys are always pretty much healthy in those upper extremities and stuff like that.
So important.
Our pro guys, you know, that again have been, you know, in the big leagues in the dozens, and then in pro baseball even you know, bigger numbers than that. You know, a lot of healthy guys getting through seasons, you know. So yeah, so just from that perspective alone, so if you tell me that it's not going to help them from a performance perspective, agree to disagree. I honestly believe, and I have reasons why I believe it does, from just kind of like you know, from a physiological standpoint and how and the movement patterns that are created through them. But from a health standpoint, like you said, we could look at the numbers and say that, hey, our guys are always healthy, and I'd say that this is a big reason why we're stimulating the tissue, obviously the neural patterns and stuff like that, but we're stimulating the tissue to be very specifically strong and very specific positions that are when they're exposed to the realm of baseball and swinging a bat and throwing a ball and stuff like that, are joints and stuff like that that are exposed to a lot of stress, and we're creating adaptation to that stress.
Absolutely, I think that makes a ton of sense. One of the things that I think has to be done more. And it doesn't mean I don't think they should do it with weights per se when they're young, but I think they should just take the broomstick out with all young kids should learn how to clean and snatch with a broomstick.
Even a foundation, no doubt.
Even if you're doing it with a broomstick for 3 years, you know, once a week.
That's really what it takes.
Yeah.
So by the time they actually need to move some weight, when maybe they get to middle school or high school, and they now have the technique down. So when coaches start to introduce those things,
good to go.
Because what I've noticed is that obviously the hardest thing with those things is technique, right?
Yeah.
So
Now
college athletes will pick up things quicker than obviously younger kids. I mean, high school athletes. But if you could start introducing it without any weights, really, or very tiny amount of weight, you know, just so they get the technique. You by the time they get to high school, they'll know how to do those lifts, and then you won't have to worry about bypassing them because you're not going to teach them, and you won't get anything out of it because of the technique wise. I think that's what happens, because I've gone back and forth on this myself on it. Like, is it good? Is it not? And kind of my general thought process is really cleans and snatches should be introduced either with no weight or tiny amounts of weight to get the technique down at younger ages. Because by the time when there's, you know, no stress on the body basically, and they can learn the technique, and now when they need to use it, when it could actually really be beneficial to them athletically, they don't have to bypass it because they can't get the right technique down, or the coach gets frustrated because it takes the athlete forever to learn it, and this good athlete can do it, this kid can't, and they're just like, let's do high post. Not there's anything wrong with it, but I'm just saying that. If it could be introduced earlier, I think that they would get it and then not have a problem when they get to older age is doing it, and where obviously a strength and conditioning coach at high school level is limited time, and then obviously ultimately when they come,
No, sorry, go ahead.
No, finish. No, that was not my point.
Yeah, no, and then when you get them doing it younger, you get them more, kind of like more. You get more of a plasticity out of the athlete, right? Where you can get them into these positions,
and they're bought in.
It's so much easier, and then now you're not dealing with guys like me that where I have to basically zombie clean because I don't have the mobility in my shoulders or my elbow to get into a good clean position. I'll still do it because I love it, but injuries or whatever have cost me that ability. But young guys, you can get them in proper position so much easier. They can learn it so much easier. Same thing with running, right? If you get guys running really sprinting and learning the technique of sprinting earlier on, it makes it so much easier, and the adaptation process, it becomes so much more beneficial than if you wait until these guys are 16 and 18 and even 20 to start teaching them how to run. Not that you're not going to get better and you could get really good, but if you start learning how to sprint at 10 years old, 11 years old, 12 years old, when your body's really going through serious kind of maturation processes, and just like you learn a language at 8 years old.
It's easier.
It takes you 6 months to learn language fluently, and you have it for life.
Correct.
We're talking about bringing the muscle before. You
awesome.
Try to learn a language at 20, you're gonna have a thick ass accent. You try to learn a language at 40, you probably won't even learn it. Right.
Or you're definitely not going to grasp it on the level that to be
right. To be super comfortable conversationally and all that. So that's just outliers aside. But that almost takes me to what you were talking about with the lightweight and stuff like that. And I definitely agree. Get the technique right and stuff like and all that stuff. But I start thinking about when we start talking about training young athletes, whether it be 10 to 12 years old or even 12 to 14 in that range, depending on kind of like when you like to start getting them some sort of resistance training or some kind of performance training. We always tend to err, and I've been thinking about this a lot lately. I had thought about it before. I've done it differently before. Then I've shifted my kind of like my thought processes a few times in my life, but we always try to like think, okay, well, they don't really need much because we're just building coordination. We're not going to build muscle mass or anything like that. So very general preparation is the key, right? It's what we all kind of say. General preparation, just body weight squats, push-ups, pull-ups, and all that stuff will go a long way, and it will go a long way because you're building kind of like the neural connection to get those muscles working the right way, right? But if that is the most adaptive age, right? You look at things like how like in my training process, like when I do like those what we call dynamic isos or dynamic eccentrics, which is the bypassing of the eccentric part and then the smashing of the brakes, right? And hitting the brakes really hard, which by the way, like everybody's doing that, by the way. That's like a huge thing now. Even we were talking about Paf and Stu McMillan before. Stu McMillan is like, that's his biggest weight training thing now. I don't know who kind of exposed him to that, but he loves it now. But anyways, but yeah, if the adaptive age that's going to get the most benefit out of training is that say 11 to 14-year-old, why put away, if they can handle it, right? Why only stick to the general preparation type exercise, and why not actually start exposing them to the things that could really make them different as an athlete? The things that we're going to do to an 18-year-old or a 20-year-old because we want to make them different as an athlete. Why not start doing that at an age when they can really? And it's a question. It's a question. I'm not saying that.
Yeah. No, I actually, I agree. I think that's 100%. To me, it's a balance. I mean, it's a balancing act, right? But like one of the things I always think about is, my brother was very strong for his body weight growing up, right? So he could always knock out push-ups and sit-ups and just genetically, could do that. He was a distance runner in college, but that was always one of his advantages because he was like generally very strong. He wrestled as a young kid, and he was just really strong for his body weight. Like I remember he could do pull-ups. Like I couldn't do, like I really couldn't do those things very well. You know what I mean? Like I was okay push-up wise. I could do, but like he would go down and knock out 50. Like, any of these contests, like, I'd be like knocking out 10 and I'd be like, thank God I knocked out 10. Right. And then my father started us in strength training. Okay. Like for wrestling primarily. And I think we might've been like 10, 11 years old that time when we started doing it. And he was a phys ed teacher and a track coach, and started doing with us primarily for wrestling, right? To get us stronger. And amazingly, the strength training, benching and stuff like that, which is what he kind of started us with, I did very well with it, right? And what was amazing about it was years later, my push-ups, I really became great at push-ups. Right. Not because I was good at my brother was always naturally good at push-ups. But because I was so strong lifting wise, I was able to do a lot of push-ups, and I could just knock them out. And, people were always like, "Oh, you're so good at push-ups," and I'm like, I was actually terrible at push-ups growing up. I was not really. I couldn't do pull-ups, and I always thought the thing I was always proudest of was my senior year. They tested us on pull-ups, which I was horrible at. I remember when he used to do the presidential fitness thing. If I could do one, that was great. If I could do one, And I was naturally I was a much better athlete, skill-wise and speed-wise than my brother. But he was great strength to body weight, gymnastic stuff. That was just who he was. And when I knocked out 21 pull-ups in our testing at UConn my senior year, I just thought it was just like a minor miracle, Like I was like, how did I do more pull-ups than every other linebacker? And to me, it was our strength training. Like it was our strength training. Yes, I started, practice pull-ups more for the test, but if you go back to who I was as a kid, no way. And now that I don't lift as much as like with my back and stuff as an older adult, like I do it, but more, body look nicer thing, I can't knock out pull-ups the way that I used to. So when I was strength training at an intense level for a long time period, development years all the way through college, it really impacted all of those other areas. So that's where my mind kind of goes back to always. And look, my father was ahead of his time when he had us do it. Like people used to be like, your kids' growth are going to be studied. Well, my brother's 6'2", I'm 6'1", you know what I mean? So, and my father was he said he was 6 feet, but he probably was really 5'11", you know what I mean? So we're taller than he was, and he lifted with us. So obviously, that had zero impact on it, and he did things right. Like it wasn't like we were max lifting and stuff like that when we were young. But I kind of always go back a little bit to that. It's like there are multiple ways to develop somebody's strength levels and speed levels, depending on what their strengths are, like you talked about earlier, what their deficiencies are, and how good your art form development is of that process. There is obviously science to it. And but how you're able to really deal with the athlete. And I think that's really an amazing thing. And I love that you talked about that those development years are so important, because as someone who now, coached high school and worked with college athletes for a long time, now working with the youngest levels, that's always questions parents ask. And I'm like, listen, now there's so many examples of kids who worked out as a younger age, did it the right way. And there's all these pros. I mean, all of these pros now, the vast majority of them were doing some form of working out from the time they were 10, 11 years old, maybe, some of them even earlier. Mm-hmm. And, I actually love, like there's a lot of things I disagree with John Brown on, you probably see a lot of his podcasts. There's things I disagree. He's more of like a bodybuilder kind of trainer. But the one thing I do agree with him on is that your kid should work out. Like your kid should work out if they want to be a good athlete. Like that's an important part of it. I mean, that's kind of the message when I sift through the other stuff. Right. I say that's the message. The message is, hey, man, work out, sleep, eat, you'll grow, and you'll have a better opportunity to be successful. And then obviously as you move up the ladder, you find guys that can help you do it better.
Right.
But those are really those core things are really, really important. And I love how you're really like, and I don't want to hold you on any longer because we had you on forever, but you know, you really, the things that you're doing and the things that you're diving into and how you process how you're developing your athletes. It's awesome. It's awesome.
Thank you.
It's no doubt the success you're having, you know what I mean? Because the way that you process it. And I love that you're like me, that you'll dive into anything, but you also sift through it to say, hey, is this real? Is this fake? Can I incorporate some of it? Should I throw some of this in the garbage? You know, and if you're wrong down the line, you know, you shift on it. You know what I mean? Like, I think that's what makes coaches good. And, you know, I think final thoughts, Coach. Final thoughts.
Yeah, definitely. So I think you know, and I'll make the final thought kind of like just to piggyback off your point. You talked about like the science and the art of it and stuff like that, and coaching is that, right? Coaching is merging science and art. But I think at a high level of an artist and a high level of a scientist, the one commonality between the two, and you can say that they're both totally extreme, but the one commonality is the curiosity, right? They're both very curious human beings, right? The scientists and the artists are both very curious human beings, and a coach, again, is both, right?
It's both.
If you're not a curious human being by nature, you know, you're saying we go down these rabbit holes and we sift through it, and is there something here? This is a bunch of baloney. What's going on here? But that curiosity is part of kind of just what drives you, I think. You know,
there's no doubt about it. My wife said to me, if I buy another attachment for the rack I have for me and my son, you know, if I buy another attachment, he's going to lose their mind. The rack has like 9,000 different attachments off of it, you know, because I'm always like, okay, well, we do these core things. Can this work? You know, and I got I got all these attachments. My garage is hilarious. But you know, I think that's, you're nailed on the head. The curiosity and the ability to try and figure things out. And, you know, when you're, I love it when my wife opens the door. I'm experimenting on different drills on myself before I have my right. son or do it, you know, and she's like, geez, she's like, are you getting yourself hurt doing that? I said, well, as long as I don't do it on my right knee, I'm okay. But yeah, I'm constantly doing it. I'm like, okay, because sometimes it does help, and it's hard as you get older because you can't do as many things that you used to. But it does sometimes help to say, okay, can I feel how this feels? Will my athlete feel this? You know what I mean? It's like there is always, I do think, something to it. And then obviously, you know, Dan Pfaff is obviously not feeling it out anymore, or Stu McMillan might. Right. Oh, Stu's still in great shape for an older guy, but you know, obviously the brain's the most important thing, you know, but and the observantness. But it's great. It's great the way you think of things, and man, let's have you back sometime sooner than 2 years from now.
Yeah, for sure. Absolutely. We love it, man. That's crazy.
It's great having you on, Coach. You're doing great things. What's your Twitter again? You know, someone wants to go pay you a bunch of money, come speak for them.
That'd be awesome.
You know,
yeah, I'm definitely down for a lot of money for anything. Nick Soto _performance is my Instagram handle, and then you can also, I think, you look up Gorilla Baseball Club. I think is the other one, and I think it's on TikTok also. I'm mostly on my Instagram, on my personal Instagram one, which has become the business one. Yeah, it's usually the one but all of them kind of post all the stuff that we do, and
okay,
we get a lot of information just from kind of watching our reels and our posts, and kind of like get the basis of the philosophy of what we're trying to accomplish with our athletes, baseball or otherwise, and maybe get a few tidbits on kind of how we do, and if it jives with them, that's great. You know, hope they use it.
Absolutely. Coach, thanks so much for coming on. We'll see you real soon. I appreciate you taking all the time.
Take care.
All right. Bye.
You well, guys. Bye-bye.
All right. Bye.